got Tony Friedrich on the screen, as you can all see. Our everyone knows Tony well. He's been here since day one. We got Ed Kim from New England Aquarium and Jeff Kneebone from New England Aquarium.
Welcome everybody to the 2024 edition of Masters of the Fly. It's our first episode of the season, and it's our fourth season. And we're really flattered that you guys are still tuning in to see us. So thank you very much. I want to thank, Tom and Clay. You guys really do yeoman's work for us here. And, without you, Lou and I would not be able to do this. So thank you very, very much. We have a great schedule for 2024. And pardon me while I pull it up, because I don't want to get this wrong by date.
Actually, hey, Tom and Clay, let's call up the slides now so we can show it to folks. Yeah, there you go. Perfect.
There it is. So, of course, Saltwater Guides Association's tonight. Stock the Box with special guest Ben Wally. It will be January 21st. We have Captain Joe Blados on February 4th, and we're going to get a firsthand look at the crease fly and how he came up with the idea. That's going to be very exciting. February 25th, Tim O'Neill with nor-vise, and he'll be tying for us. We don't know what's going on March 3rd yet, but it will be happening. And then Lou, what is March 17th?
So March 17th, we've got the brilliant, innovative Blaine Chocolate, who's going to be showing us his game changer flies and his whole new line, which I've had. He and Tony have given me the privilege of getting a sneak peek on, and they are, I mean, game changing is exactly the right term for them. They're unbelievable. I am going to be stocking up on those flies in my box. So we have the privilege of having Blaine with us to show us what he's up to.
That'll be a lot of fun. And I just want to remind everybody that you guys can tune into our YouTube channel, Instagram, and Facebook for updates throughout the season. I do want to thank the American Saltwater Guides Association, GotOne, nor-vise, and Saltwater Edge, and last but not least, the Articulate Fly, which I've been lucky enough to be a featured guest on this season. I'm very flattered about that. Lou, with that, why don't I throw the show back to you for a little while?
Yep, that sounds great. And actually, if you put the slides back up, just so folks know a couple things. One is, I think many of you knew from our social posts, thanks to Tony and ASGA, we're going to do a special giveaway tonight. So anyone who has is on the show tonight with us and also has downloaded and registered their email on the GotOne app, and we'll give you a link for that in a second, is eligible for a prize. We've got 3 great prizes today. Tony, you want to tell people what we're giving away?
Yeah,
just a ASGA hat, one of our cotton shirts, and a real nice kind of medium to large size dry bag from one of our sponsors, Costa Del Mar.
Yeah, that's a great, I love that dry bag.
So again, like Lou, all they have to do is if you're on the thing tonight, if you haven't downloaded GotOne yet, do that, and we'll kind of randomly select the winner and shoot you an email and get your address and get it in the mail to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Tony. And I know Tom Fuda is in the background. He's running the randomizer, secret randomizer on the whole thing. So yeah, so if you download the app, register, here's a QR code for it and the website. And then if you go back one slide, these are links in the QR codes here. You can just scan it with your phone for the Anderson Cabot Center at New England Aquarium, for the incredible work that ASGA has been doing on striped bass on behalf of all of us as saltwater anglers, and also more information on the Albie Project.
And Lou,
yeah,
just in case people are worried, the information that you guys put on the GotOne app is completely your own and nobody else can see it. Because as a guide, I know I don't want to be burning spots. So you shouldn't worry about that. It's such a wonderful app to use, and you guys should just be downloading it right now.
Thank you, David. And I know David, we have David and Tom Kaczynski. Captain Tom are two of our most frequent and busiest users of the app. So thank you guys for all that. Cool. So with that, let me turn it over to Tony to get us kicked off here. And I think many of you, if not all of you, know Tony. Tony is the head of the American Saltwater Guides Association, which has been, sort of tirelessly working on all of our behalf as fishermen, passionate fishermen, saltwater fishermen, to protect our fish and our fisheries. He's going to talk about the state of striped bass coming out of 2023, what the agenda is for 24, and then introduce our friends from New England Aquarium to talk about the Albie Project. So with that, Tony, let me hand it over to you.
Thank you, Lou. Great to see everyone on here tonight. Appreciate a couple of minutes of everyone's time. So, yeah, I just kind of want to tell you where striped bass have been and where we think it's going. So most of y'all remember the emergency action a little bit earlier on. Just catch you up with a little bit of history. The emergency action only affected recreational anglers, and what it did was it tightened up the slot, and the intention was to get those fish, the 2015 year class, out of the harvest slot. They were trying to right a wrong when they were trying to right a wrong when they did that. Back, if you go back way in the Wayback Machine a couple of years to Addendum 6, we begged and pleaded to have the limit changed to one fish just to 36 inches, and we were opposed to the slot limit because the 2015 year class was maturing and we knew harvest was going to go through the roof. Well, it did in 2022, and then we had that emergency action take place. Did it do enough? No. So now we had to initiate more management actions that took more time, and unfortunately they stalled a little bit, and we just finished the comment period on Addendum 2 to Amendment 7, which is going to basically codify, for lack of a better word, the emergency action, and hopefully also make the commercial sector do their part to rebuild the stock. So that's kind of where we are, and the big thing is, where are we going? And this is a real tenuous conversation because we know that there were certain areas of the country who had, arguably very good years. And there were certain areas that had really terrible years. And let me kind of paint a picture of what we think is going to happen. Tom, if you don't mind, can you just put that one chart that I sent over, if you have it ready? That'd be great. Thank you, Tom. So this is Maryland's juvenile striped bass abundance. You can see this has been going on since 1954. This is the young of the year that are spawned in Maryland. So let me put this in perspective for you. The reason why, if you had a good year where you were, if you focus on 2011 and 2015 and look at them versus all the other years, those are the fish that you're catching. And yes, there's some giants. You have fish from the 2003 year class. You had a couple of real robust year classes too, and there's some of them left. But I'm just kind of gonna address something because we got a whole bunch of people on the call at once. The striped bass did not go to Nova Scotia. The other rivers on the East Coast and estuaries cannot support what Maryland can support. And again, I'm just pointing out here that y'all are catching the early 2000s, 2011, and the 2015 year class from, what's that first word in the chart? Maryland. That's why you're having a good year. So I'd like you to now look at 2019 to 2023. That is the lowest time series ever recorded for 4 or 5 years. We've never had about 5 bad years in a row. So striped bass fully recruit when they're 8 years old. So that means basically the first year of pretty much coastwide terrible fishing is going to be 2027. That's when they're going to kind of start to fall off the charts. You're not going to have a lot of those 2000 fish left. You'll have some 2011s and some 2015s, and that'll be it. So, Tom, you can pop that off now if you want, so everyone can see our lovely faces. So, because you have some pretty serious issues in the Chesapeake Bay that are related to fishing mortality, and you know, I don't know if everyone knows this, and I'm not going to take up too much more time, but in the Chesapeake Bay, the striped bass spawn in multiple waves. The biggest fish are here first, and they, in reaction to like a warmer spring, they will spawn several weeks earlier. It's not like they're just tied to a certain day. They will come up earlier. They will spawn earlier if it's a warm winter. So because they spawn in waves, it's almost like the fish want the optimal conditions. And while some of the winters have been warm here, I live in between two of the major spawning rivers in the Chesapeake Bay on the eastern shore. I've lived in this area for a quarter of a century, and I would wager that I have fished more than most people. Where I live is the Dead Sea.
Hmm.
It's pretty stark, and I'm not going to get into it that much. There's some big fish right across the bay from me, and there's some more big fish down by the Potomac, and some around Virginia, and that is about it. Um, it isn't a shadow of what it was. There aren't very many small fish, and there was so much bait I could have walked across it this year. So it's coming. And what the Guides Association is trying to do is protect what we have left, because it's all we have to build on. The good news is that striped bass are incredibly resilient. They're kind of a jack of all trades. They can do all sorts of things, and I would suggest the multitude of varieties that we can catch them is proof positive of that. They're not very specific in if they can fit in their mouth. A striper's usually pretty okay with eating it. Um, so they're incredibly resilient, and we just have to have enough fish out there to when the time is right, one of those 4 waves can come up and have a decent spawn. We got a lot of snow in Pennsylvania just yesterday. Usually when that happens in the beginning of January, the ground kind of gets locked in, and we have another storm and another storm and another storm. So, future's a little bit brighter for this potential spawn coming up. So it isn't the end of days. We aren't at the moratorium levels that we were at in the mid to early 80s, but we're getting close. And we're going to be in a really bad spot in about 5 or 6 years. And we're going to stay there for about 5 years.
So
So let's do as much as we can for conservation. Let's save these big fish, give them an opportunity to have a bunch of little baby stripers. And I'm going to stop now. If anyone has any questions about stripers, we can address them at the end of this. Just, put it in the chat. One of the cool things we did, so it's not over for stripers, but we have to be incredibly cautious, incredibly conservative, and do what we can to save what we got. So that's a high note. I tried to end on a high note because everyone says I'm all dour and stuff. The next high note that we have is the Albie Project. I hope some of y'all are familiar with that. But basically, as a guides association, it kind of dawned on us several years ago that our community cannot afford to lose another fish on the East Coast. And the one fish, we're small but mighty. So the one fish that kind of connects us all from Florida to Martha's Vineyard is false albacore. And when we started digging in, essentially there was no science on them, and they weren't managed. And that means I could go out if I wanted to and catch 1,000 pounds tomorrow. and it would be perfectly legal in most areas. So in any event, when we asked, hey, can we manage these things? They said, hey, well, there's no science. So then we said, well, we'll produce the science. And here we are. We're very fortunate that we teamed up with New England Aquarium. It has been fun, I know, for the Guides Association to work with Jeff and Ed. I think when we first approached Jeff about this, he may have been a little hesitant, but I think he has fallen in love with false albacore over time. They are an incredibly interesting fish. New England Aquarium specifically inserts the telemetry tags, the little beeper tags that we can follow the fish all around the coastline. They insert them and they monitor them for us and synthesize the information, and then kind of tell us the science end of it. So it's incredibly valuable. It's incredibly useful. On top of that, we're doing DNA work to see if it's one connected stock for the East Coast. We're also doing Floy tags, spaghetti tags with a lot of our guides in multiple areas. And we look forward this year. It looks like we're going to do our best to expand the Albie project to include Nantucket Sound, where it's been going on, as well as North Carolina. So we just have an absolute ton of stuff that we're learning about albies. They're an awesome fish. Ed, I'm going to let you take it away. Ed's kind of been Mr. Albie from the New England Aquarium. We couldn't ask for a better partner. So Ed, you're on,
Awesome.
buddy.
And actually, maybe we could ask Ed and Jeff to introduce yourselves. And also, as Tony mentioned, if you have any questions, just stick them in. There is a Q&A box down. If you scroll down to the bottom of your Zoom, you can stick them in there. Certainly, if you want to put them in chat, that's fine too. But we'll queue up the questions and we'll answer all of them when we get over the presentations. But Jeff and Ed, maybe you could just tell people a little bit about who you are and all the great work that you guys are doing.
Ed, I'll jump in first. First of all, thanks, Tony, for the great introduction, and thanks, Lou, for having us. So I'm Jeff Kneebone. I'm a senior scientist at the Anderson Cabot Center for Ocean Life at the New England Aquarium, which is in Boston. First thing to say about that, most people think of the aquarium as just that, the building that has all the animals on exhibit. The New England Aquarium does have that. Again, I said it's in Boston, but we also have another branch of the aquarium that's dedicated solely to research. So I have a lab within that arm. We do fisheries work on all kinds of different species, mostly highly migratory fishes, bluefin tuna, yellowfin tuna, some bunch of sharks. We work on ground fish. I've done a bunch of work on striped bass in the past, so I have a pretty good background. And Ed came to the party, I think, a year and a half ago now, April 2022. And he's done a great job in our lab, fit right in. He loves to fish. We make a great team, and he's Mr. Albie. So we'll hear from him. But thank you again for having us, and take it away, Ed.
Yep. Thank you again to all for having us. I'll keep my intro pretty quick, simply because I'm going to be talking a lot for the next 10 to 15 minutes. But again, I'm Ed Kim. I'm an associate scientist with the New England Aquarium. As Jeff said, I started here about a little over a year and a half ago. And several months after that, got tossed into this Albie project. And I will say it's been a little crazy, a lot of cool, and most definitely interesting. So hopefully I'll be able to share a little bit about that with you tonight. So I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen now. All right. All right, you guys can all see that okay?
Yeah, we got it.
Perfect. All right, so I'll start from the very beginning for those of you who aren't familiar with the project. So the technique we use is called acoustic telemetry, which is a paired system of both receivers and transmitters or tags. And we use these to track the movements of fish. So these tags emit unique pings of sound, and anytime a fish or any other animal, say like a researcher wants to study a turtle, gets close enough to these receivers, that receiver will pick up that ping and identify that fish as being there. And the best way that we've come up to describe this is that it's kind of like our cell phones. So we all have cell phones that are uniquely identified to us with our names and numbers. Say you want to go out for a drive on a nice day. If you happen to drive close enough to a phone tower, your phone is periodically and continuously giving out pings, and it will register with that tower and say, you're in that general area at that given moment in time. And it's pretty much the same concept as with acoustic telemetry, except with fish underwater. So we put these tags in or on the fish, we let them go, and they're free to swim wherever they want to. But if they happen to swim close enough to our receivers, then we'll know that. So at the end of a season, we can then download all that data and we can create a map of all the past movements of these fish if relative to where we put those receivers. So then that all begs the question, why are we studying false albacore using this technique? So there's actually not too much known about false albacore outside of some basic life history info and distribution. And on top of that, we don't know too much about how the stock is doing. And only recently there's been a push by the ASGA to start looking at management. And this is all really important because there is a huge catch and release fishery for them all up and down the East Coast by rec fishermen, as well as for hire charters. And so with that in mind, I've outlined our study objectives here, first of which is post-release survival. And because that rec fishery is almost all catch and release, not many people eat these things, it's important to know and understand if those fish are surviving that process. And so I'll stress here that this is a survival study. It's not a mortality study, because if we never end up detecting a fish, we don't know if that's because that fish died or it simply never got detected because it didn't get close enough to our receivers. So the way we carry out this part of the study is by using external tags like you see there on the right. That's attached to a dart head and a short tether. We fish for these albies on a charter like they normally would. We land them like they normally would. And from there, it's a quick jab behind the second dorsal, and then we let it go. The whole time we're trying to mimic that catch and release recreational process as closely as possible so that we can get an accurate idea. And then the next type of tag that we use is an internal tag, and it relates to the next two parts of the study. Basically, we insert this tag into the belly of the fish by first making an incision, put it in there, quickly suture it up. And we do this because we want that tag to stay inside the fish for the entire duration of that battery life. So we know everywhere that fish goes if there's a receiver there. This can be a little bit of a tricky proposition because albies, one, stress out really easily, and two, the surgery can take a few minutes. But we've had to kind of get creative with our methods to do this. So there on the left-hand side, that picture, that's a homemade tuna tube that we've rigged up. It is composed of a black trash can, an upside-down traffic cone with a semicircle cut out of it. And then at the bottom of that traffic cone, there is a bilge pump connected to a battery. And that's continuously flushing seawater up and over the fish's gills the entire time it's being tagged. And as a bonus, the fish don't really seem to thrash around too much when they're in that tube. It's kind of blacked out. So they stay still for the most part. And we found out that this method's worked pretty well for us the past 2 years, as you'll see. Now, with regards to the local habitat use in Nantucket Sound and coastal migration, these internal tags are going to let us see both fine scale and broad scale movements. And that in turn will help us dictate at what level should management be occurring. So in other words, are we looking more at one single population up and down the East Coast, or are we looking more at subpopulations, maybe by states or by regions? All right, now to get into some recent updates for the fall Nantucket Sound tagging effort. Our field season for albies runs throughout the entire fall. We'll start fishing for them when they show up in August and into October. We'll deploy receivers well before that in the spring, and then we'll haul the receivers around end of October, beginning of November, and sometimes into December. This past year, we put out 42 receivers. We've downloaded 39 of them so far. Those are the green dots that you see on that map. And then those last 3 receivers are still a work in progress. Now, we deployed 97 tags. Those are those black X's on the map. and we deployed 50 internal and 47 external tags. Of those 47, 20 of them were accelerometers. And as the name implies, in addition to pinging, they also give us values of acceleration, which then clues us into if that fish is swimming like an albie normally would, or maybe if it's swimming a little abnormally, or potentially if it could have also been depredated by something like a shark. And that work has resulted in over 43,000 detections across 91 tags. And you can see the breakdown in those 3 bullet points by the number of types of tags. And so I have to comb through that data a little further, but generally you can see there appears to be high survival overall. And finally, the last detection that we got in our array this past year was November 10th, 2023. That figure might actually be a little early because we did haul most of our receivers a bit before that. But based on 2022 and a bunch of arrays all across the Northeast too, they left that year around, the last detection was November 19th. So that November 10th figure probably isn't too far off. They seem to leave at the latest around mid-November. Right, and I kind of debated whether or not to add bullet points to this slide, because as you can see, it gets busy in a hurry. But this is a GIF showing the paths of all those 91 albies that were detected from the moment they were released throughout the rest of the fall. And just a couple basic notes on this. The average number of receivers we detected a fish on was 10 to 11. The most was 28. The most days that we detected a fish on, or the average number of days we detected a fish on, was 21 days, and the most was 54. But as you can see with your own 2 eyes, I mean, all this is to say these fish are highly mobile. They can bounce around from one end of the sound. They definitely can do so multiple times. And these are just the raw data though, so the next steps in looking at this are to see if there's any pattern in movements among areas of Nantucket Sound. So that'll be upcoming.
And Ed, what did you find? This is incredible to see this in real, like animated like this. It's just so amazing. So I can see.
Oh, it's mesmerizing.
I know. So these are each day is basically ticking by, and you can see these are highly mobile fish. What tell us more about what you found about fish traveling even farther afield, down south and so forth. What are the learnings that we have from this project in terms of the range of these fish?
Oh, that's actually the next slide, Luyen.
Oh, go,
So,
great. Go for it.
Yep. Very next slide. So this is the latest coastal migration data that we have from summer of 2023 through fall of 2023. And so this is just from the 2022 batch of tags. So all those tags from 2022. And before I really get into the nuts and bolts of this slide, I'll say that we're part of a data sharing acoustic telemetry network, along with researchers all up and down the East Coast. They're using the exact same technology that we are in order to track their own fish. So obviously when you tag a fish and let it go in your own array, it has the ability to swim outside of that array. And by being a part of this network, we can not only share the detections that we got, but also get detections back from our own fish that other researchers have. And so that left map there, that's the locations of all the detections that we got back from 15 other organizations, all up and down the East Coast. And those are color codes, so you can easily see where they're at.
But those were all fish that were tagged through this initiative. They're just picked up on other sensors.
Yeah, so those people actually don't know what those fish are. And so we'll tell them those are the albies, and everybody's sharing data too. So at the same time, we're sharing data from fish that we don't know about to other people. So there could have been fish from Florida, like sharks from Florida, for example, that swam all the way back to all the way to Nantucket Sound. And like, they'll eventually hear from us that those sharks are in our neck of the woods. It's a collaborative thing.
So I guess the message here is these are highly migratory fish, and they do travel the entire length of the Atlantic coastline.
Yeah, I mean, just about to get into that. So they're on that right. They're on the right. That's the exact same map. I've just scattered out the detections a little bit more so the points are easier to see. Otherwise, they kind of just stack up on each other. But those are color coded by the month that those detections were in. And that starts from the very first month that we started tagging for the Albie Project in August of 2022 and extends to September of 2023. So this past fall. And I think you guys can see my cursor here, maybe.
Yeah.
I'm
Yep.
gonna refer to this corner kind of up here as the Northeast region. All of the detections below that Northeast region, so from kind of here, southern New Jersey down to Florida, we detected 37 fish from other organizations. And so kind of here in this middle portion, that's comprised of 35 tags that other organizations have reported back to us. And then finally, all the way here at the bottom in all of Florida, we detected 14 total tags, with 6 of those actually being in the Florida Keys, all the way here at the bottom. And so you
Can I say one thing really quick?
yeah, shoot.
It's fascinating, you know, when y'all are accumulating all of this information. Obviously, you know, I think an interesting thing for the listeners is like we don't send y'all out with our guides and say, go catch albies. Like you have to catch the albies in that first GIF. You have no choice, because when you put that albie in the water, you want it the greatest possibility for it to ping, so y'all can, you know, think about the mortality. That's the way the science must be performed. And if you look at where albies are really important, Cape Cod, the Sound, you know, Long Island, and then look at North Carolina and look at like that central region of Florida, Jupiter, Stewart, Jensen Beach. It is incredible to me, because they are exactly where we would think they would be, based on kind of the you know, the people that love fishing for them, where they're famous to be fished for. Anyway, that's all I'll say. It's nice when the science is performed and it kind of validates what you know, and these things are fast and they move around a lot.
Yeah, and Ed, you have a couple of questions that came through the Q&A box. So how close does a fish need to actually be to a receiver, I guess, with an acoustically tagged fish to be detected? And like how densely are receivers actually distributed across that coastline?
So for the first part of the question, it kind of depends on the battery output, or like the power output of the tag, and oceanographic conditions. If it's like, I don't know, there's current, or there's a lot of stuff in the water, or if there's potentially other tags interfering too. But what the company Vemco says is that the range is from 100 meters to 1,000 meters.
Oh, wow.
Again,
Okay.
depending on the model. So like you could potentially have a fish pretty far away, and that ping will propagate and detect on that tag. And if Jeff, you might know a little bit more about the specifics, since you've been working with these receivers a little bit longer in the Sound, but that's the range is 100 to 1,000 meters, typically.
Yeah, it's going to be on the lower side. We use, I would say, middle of the road size tags for albies. So they make really teeny tiny ones that can go on like herring, and they make the big ones that we put in sharks and bigger tunas. So the albie tags are actually on the small side in terms of power output. So I'd say conservative, probably 300 meters away from the receiver is the furthest distance that a tag can be heard in our array in Nantucket Sound. Now, as Ed said, we're showing you a lot of detections from all over the place. That may vary in other areas, but for us, I think they're pretty close to the receivers when we pick them up. And just one other quick thing to add, I see there's some great questions in the chat that we'll get to, but the battery life of the tags is over a year. So in 2022, when we didn't know if this was going to work, we used tags that pinged very frequently, like less than once every minute. And that caused the battery life to be just a little short of 1 year. But in 2023, since we know that we were going to have a success and the fish were going to survive, we bumped it up, and now we have tags that I believe have up to 2 years in battery life. So we can see those returns. And Ed, why don't you talk about the return rate of the fish that we tagged in 2022?
So that'll actually, it's like leads right into my next point too, is that we got 11 returns back to Nantucket Sound, and many of those traveled the coast from Florida. And I'll say that there's a lot of individual variability by each fish, but some of them performed that journey in as little as 40 days. And if you were to crunch the numbers on that, which I'll just do for you, that's about 1,100 to 1,200 miles in a little over a month. So we're talking roughly 27-ish to 30-ish miles per day.
Wow.
So
Wow. Hey,
They're swimming a marathon per day.
I
hey,
mean, we already knew that they could swim pretty fast just from looking at our data in Nantucket Sound visually. But I mean, when they leave the array too, they still swim fast.
That's incredible.
hey, Ed, let me ask this.
Yeah.
And just remind everybody that I see questions coming up in chat, but also please put the questions in the Q&A. I think they'll get answered quicker. Just looking at the data really quickly, I guess we could surmise from this, just like a blanket statement, that really all the fish we're seeing in the Northeast are the same fish that are traveling up and down the coast. And I'm finding that really interesting, and it could also be, lead to the ultimate downfall of these fish if we don't look after them properly.
Yeah, I guess that's a really good question. Like, do you see them? I mean, do you know enough to say they're one stock that migrates up and down the coast, or are there local populations, kind of the way that we see with striped bass?
Yeah, so we detected tags along the coast, kind of here in this mill section, that did make their way down to Florida. So fish, some of them didn't just come straight from Massachusetts and then like beeline it offshore. They hit some of these arrays here along the coast. So people that are
Those
fishing
areas, like in the northern sort of Florida region, that you don't have a lot of pings, is
Yeah.
that due to a lack of sensors there, or is it they're not being picked up there as much? They're just running through.
There are arrays up and down the coast. Jeff might know a little bit more about how densely they're populated, and that also kind of gets back to the second part of the question that was asked like 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, right.
I believe there are arrays there through that data sharing network I was talking about. But
I know there's a big gap in New Jersey. I think there are some areas that may get filled in, but the good chunks of New Jersey lost their funding. I'm just trying to answer a question, Ed, not step on you.
Oh yeah.
And there was another question just to kind of, wrap up where are the receivers. Somebody asked if there were receivers in the Azores because they've seen huge albies there. So this is nothing's definitive, right? I will not stand on a pulpit and say, the albies on our East Coast are genetically different than the albies in the Mediterranean, Azores, off Africa, Spain. Big fisheries for them there. They're big fish too. But what I will say is there's a paper coming out here shortly from a team of scientists from the Eastern Atlantic, and they have tagged something along the lines of just under 8,000 albies and gotten a pretty high rate of return on those tags. And it would all signs right now are supporting that it's two separate stocks. Not a single recapture has occurred over here out of 8,000 tags. Is it definitive? Is it would I bet my life on it? Not yet, but we're sure getting close. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's great. And a few others, just some great questions coming up here. There was a question, John Papsiak was asking about the methodology behind all of this, and whether there's an opportunity with things like AI to model how these fish are moving with more accuracy.
I mean, that's kind of the next steps. I've never dabbled with AI, so I don't know if it would relate to this, how well it would relate to this. But I mean, next steps is to, see whether or not there's any movement patterns behind this. in Nantucket Sound all along the coastline. This detection map could get filled out a little bit more if more data comes in. But I mean, as we're seeing it now, I think it's painting pretty good story that these fish do move up and down the coast. I think there's potential for AI to be incorporated. I just don't know how.
And I think it's a really good point,
personally.
Ed. Like,
Yeah.
AI the more data you have,
Yeah.
the better it is. So is this project funded for future years? Tony, maybe that's a question for you, Tony, and maybe a good opportunity for folks on this call to help.
Lou, right after this Zoom meeting, I'm just going to go run up and down the street and find random people and shake their pockets. That's how we're funding this project currently.
Yep.
Somehow it all, by the way, if anyone would like to help fund the Albie Project, you could go to our website and hit the donate now button, and in the note go to the
Yeah, Clay
Albie
and Tom,
Project.
if you can put the link in the
And
chat, that would be great.
Every penny will go to the Albie Project, because like we're as jazzed up as everyone else is about this, and
Yeah.
there's just certain things that we don't know or we're not positive. We see things, but we're not like 100. Let me give you an example to everyone who's asking the questions. So like, and Ed, tell me if I'm misrepresenting this. I don't think I am, or I wouldn't be talking. But the map on the right, a lot of that information, people are humans. For some reason, there's actually a rhythm to when these places share the data, these different institutions that own the arrays. It's not like one public deal, universities, aquariums, everything, they own the arrays up and down the coast, and they all share it. Well, I guess December, we get the big yearly download where everyone talks to each other and shares things. And last December, that was the first time that we saw the data. And when we saw it, the first question was, there's some big gaps in there. And I know, these people fish for albies in this location, and there's no way the albies weren't there. And then we got another download this December, and it was some missing data from the previous year that it wasn't downloaded, and it filled in the gaps exactly where we said, hey, I bet that array didn't share their data yet. I guess the antiquated part of all of this, and it's just a funding thing, but these scientists actually have to physically go out to these buoys and physically download the information. It's not like it's beamed up to a cloud. So it's not, it's not like the great white thing where you can click on it and follow the great white around the ocean. The scientists physically have to go out, download the information from the receiver, go by boat back in. So it's not instantaneous. It takes longer.
So that actually answers one of the questions from Jared about,
that's why I brought it up. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it actually answers one of the questions Jared had about, is it possible to view the pings online somewhere in real time? So the answer is no, but you guys will you're obviously publishing the results as you go. And I know, where do people go if they want to really stay in touch with this research? To the ASGA site or to somewhere else?
I mean, they can go to both. So we link,
Yeah.
we link to ASGA, ASGA links to us. If you've been keeping up with this project, you'll know that map on the right-hand side was also up on the latest blog post. I think it was back in August or July last year. It's the same map, just with fewer detections. And so next blog post will probably have an updated map for you as well. And yeah, like Tony was making with the point before, is that, I mean, sometimes like people are late with uploads, or sometimes field work, like things get in the way. For example, like we still have 3 receivers out there that we need to get to, which is going to say like this map is an update. It's not like truly the end map. Although those tags did end up dying this past fall from 2022. They're definitely dead. So we're not probably going to get detections much past September 2023. We may get some that squeak into October. I doubt it, but there's still we still got data back in 2023 from people who had it from 2022. So just to give you an idea, this can take a little bit of time.
Yeah, it takes a little bit, and you got to be patient. Scott had a good question I saw just come up, and this is me bragging on y'all as scientists. He said, are you tracking the size of the albies? So try to answer a whole bunch of questions here. Yeah, they take recordings of everything. Even when it's just our guides and it's not the scientists, even when we're doing the Floy, the spaghetti tags, every measurement, pictures, everything. I think next year we're going to incorporate Lu's GotOne app. Well, this year now, this year we're going to include Lu's GotOne app, because that's where I think AI can really come into place. Everyone's got to use it though, right? You take a picture of both sides of the albie, and then the AI learns. And when we have enough in the repository and enough people are using the app, it can hit matches when the fish is recaptured. The AI conceivably will be able to identify individual fish, and years from now, maybe that will take over the place of Floy tagging. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Yeah. And thanks for teeing that up. I'll talk about that in a minute, because I think it's really, that's the future. But this is super incredibly exciting. Ed, more to cover on this before we keep going?
Honestly, we've kind of covered most of it, but I could just finish it out and then we can
Yep.
take on the rest of the questions. Let's see. So just outlining this migration part a little bit more. I mentioned they leave our waters around mid-November. They'll kind of travel through or either stay in. We're not entirely sure about that yet. Through this middle part from North Carolina down to Florida, it seems. That's through the winter and the spring. And then we found some down here in Tequesta, Florida from the most recent push of data that spans from May through July. So part of those fish are also staying in Florida for part of the summer at least. And so those fish, some of those in Tequesta were the ones that came up to Massachusetts. So detected them in, like, some of them in July, and then back up here in Massachusetts in August and September. So then again, we kind of touched on this. It all circles back to that topic of connectivity. So, I mean, based on this data, it looks like it all points to it being a single connected population. And that's also something that's been supported by genetics work that the ASGA has been working on with a researcher from Cornell. We sampled albies from Massachusetts to North Carolina for fin clips all at the same exact time. And that person found out it's most likely one single genetic group in that region. So, I mean, you were to look.
Ed.
Yeah.
We had to get I just want to put an exclamation point on this.
Yep.
We had to get fin clips from albies from in Florida, North Carolina, I think New York, and Cape Cod. All of them within 4 or 5 days of each other. I want everyone to think about that. The coordinate, we had to get fin clips from all of those areas in a couple of days, because we didn't want the albies to be able to swim to, North Carolina, right? Couldn't be done over the course of a season. And the initial data says that it is one coastal stock, but there's more DNA work that we're going to do in 2024. If all of y'all click the donate now button that was so graciously put into the chat, we might actually be able to do it, because I think it's cheaper to send a rocket to the moon at this juncture than do DNA on albies. So yeah, anyway, I know there was a DNA question in there, but more science needs to be done.
Yeah.
I think you
great.
answered the DNA question very well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's perfect. I originally thought, I think I read on the ASGA at some point that it was through North Carolina, but if they also took fin clips through Florida, that kind of matches up perfectly with what we're seeing here too.
So what are the, I mean, this is incredible. And, I have said to Tony many times, like if I had $1 for every argument I got into as to whether the albies they catch at the end of the year in Harker's Island are the same ones we catch in Montauk and Orient Point or Cape Cod, I'd be a very rich man. And now it feels like we've actually through science been able, and through funding through ASGA, been able to answer that question, which is just so incredible. I guess a question for you, Tony, like what is this, what are the implications of this from a management standpoint? But who manages false albacore, and
one.
what does this tell us?
No one manages false albacore. It's kind of unbelievable that in 2024 there's still important fish like this that have absolutely no management. So I'll just be honest, one of the things that concerns us the most is there's a pretty robust bait fishery in Florida. And unfortunately, the way that Florida has their the way they have their commercial fishery organized is, there's some real high value fisheries in Florida, fish that are quite expensive per pound, and most of those high value fisheries are limited entry. So one of the ways to get access to those limited entry high value fisheries for commercial fishermen is to show the state that you're, a legitimate commercial fisherman by catching a lot of pounds of fish. Well, the two victims of this have been Jack Crevalle and false albacore. Juvenile Jack Crevalle and false albacore in Florida can be sold for a variety of things, and there's just a very basic daily poundage limit, and it's quite high. So people are leveraging these two species to get access to those high value fisheries. And there's a gillnet fishery in North Carolina that is actually has a very small food market, goes to Canada, most of it. But what we want to do is, and we're not there yet, what we want to do is come up with an overwhelming body of work that kind of leaves managers no other options but to put some basic guardrail management on these fish. So, like I said in the very beginning of the Zoom, we can't afford to lose another fish. They told us,
Especially if we're not going to have any striped bass, is what you're telling us.
Yeah,
correct.
and
I'm
Tony,
really trying not to be Debbie Downer here, man. I've got that reputation.
and Tony, like the striped bass studies and the redfish studies, they show the economic impact of having a robust fishery for those two species. I would imagine that's the next thing that's going to come forward.
Yeah, so 2024, we are gonna, as much as we can, we're gonna replicate the work that we did in Louisiana for redfish. We're able to execute a survey, a super short version of the story, but we were able to execute a survey in Louisiana, and over time got enough entries, got scientists to produce some great reports, found out the redfish fishery in Louisiana is worth approximately $356 million a year, or $336 million a year. And as long as the redfish population is depressed as it is right now, they're losing anywhere from 20 to 50 million a year, the state of Louisiana. So if anyone listening, this is a heads up. If you see from us in a couple of months, to please take an Albie survey, because we're going to include shorebound and boat private anglers as well as our guides. Please do the damn survey, because it will go to build the body of science that shows how valuable this fishery is to the coast.
That's
And
right.
that'll take about a year. I hate
Very
saying
cool.
that, but it'll take about a year.
And that's really important because I've noticed in some marketplaces and online and various social media, boats full of albies, and that's something that we don't want to see anymore.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So let's in the interest of time, so incredible. Thank you, Ed. Super, super exciting presentation, and just really exciting to see the science. And hopefully we keep this as a community funded to keep going forward. So, Ed, Jeff, Tony, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd love to talk a little bit about how what we found with the GotOne app, and how some of the things we're doing with GotOne also connect with this. And then in the interest of time, maybe just quick program note. So I think all of the panelists are willing to go a little long, hopefully. So we'll continue Q&A. We know other people have to drop off. But I'm going to talk a little bit about what we found with GotOne this year, and then we're going to do the drawing for the 3 giveaways from Tony and ASGA. Tom Feuda's got that all fired up in the background. But just to make sure everyone stays at least to the end of this, we'll keep that, hold that for the end, and then we'll go to more Q&A after that, as long as Ed, Jeff, and Tony are willing to hang with us for a little bit here. So why don't I share my screen here and just very quickly talk to you about what we found in the first year of the GotOne app. And I think most of you are familiar with the app, but just in case anyone isn't, this is something that that I actually built just as a obsessed angler, as a way to keep a log of the fish that I caught. But in working with Tony and ASGA and scientists like Jeff and Ed, started to realize that it was also an incredible tool for contributing to the science of fisheries. And so, you know, it's very simple. You download it for your iPhone or your Android phone. You can log a fish catch with a photo, with your voice, by tapping it. Super easy to do. It pulls in all the environmental data, the tide information, the moon phase, water temperature, and it gives you a kind of a personal log, the log you've always wanted to have. I used to keep mine on paper and pen, and you know, of course, it never really worked out well when I was wading and getting decked by waves. It does a really great job of keeping the record of your catches, but we also sort of truncate all of the location data to protect your secret spots, and we aggregate the data so that scientists and fisheries manager have access to this. And it's been an amazing first year. So, you know, we had by the end of the year almost 7,000 fish logged by over 1,500 anglers, almost 3,800 striped bass logged, but fish across a wide range of species all around the US, mostly focused on the Atlantic and Gulf Coast, but really all around the world. You can see from this chart here, the surge of fish logged and caught was really in the fall, September, October, kind of corresponding with the northeastern fall run, but also, you know, we just launched the app at the beginning of the year, so makes sense that it kind of built over time. And we're starting to, you know, see some really interesting insights, right? So the most productive days for fishing across all species was October 4th, October 25th. We logged fish from January 2nd till last output of this was December 18th. You know, all of you using the app caught fish on 325 unique days. Here are the most productive spots for GotOne anglers. Cape Cod, the northern New England coast were the big winners. New York Bight to Raritan Bay, Gardner's in the Peconic. I know some folks on this call might have been particularly responsible for that incredible number of catches in that area, David.
Yeah, wow.
This actually shows you by species where fish were logged on the app. We actually built a striper migration map this year where we could look, we used actually AI technology with ChatGPT and our GotOne database to be able to look at size of fish caught by date and where they were logged across time. So if you think about this and what Ed and Jeff are working on with Albie's, this is, to me, the future of all of this. We can converge the tagging, the physical tagging they're doing with the virtual tagging that all of you are doing with the GotOne app to create, you know, even more robust data sets that show the migration and movement of fish across our coastlines, which is just incredibly helpful. Interesting to see sort of, again, the most productive weeks for striped bass. Interesting that it was really the weeks around the new and the full moon in October. The big moons in October were the key the key producers of striped bass. Not surprising, but very reinforcing to see that from all your data. Interesting also to see, I often wonder about the tide and what was most successful for striped bass. Turns out that for striped, all fish actually, but striped bass in particular, it was the around the low tides that we saw the most number of fish caught, and particularly around the end of the incoming outgoing tides and the beginning of the incoming tides. This was actually really interesting to me here on the right, was optimal water temperatures for striped bass. You know, I always thought of that as one monolithic thing. It turns out it's really different depending on what region you're fishing in, which actually makes total sense. It's just I never thought about it that way. So it turns out if you're fishing in Cape Cod, the optimal temperature is actually much higher than it is if you're in Raritan Bay in New York Bight, where the optimal temperatures where we caught the most fish was actually quite a bit lower. So Cape Cod, it really peaks around 64 degrees, you know, starting around 60 degrees. In Raritan Bay, it's really from the 40s all the way on up to 60 that the peak fish activity was logged, which makes sense given the fact that most of those fish were probably logged, you know, in the early spring and late fall. So those are some of the, you know, very quick insights that we got from the app. But then a couple other things I wanted to show you. One was this in particular. So we had a partnership with Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries, where we looked at, many of you participated in this, where MassDMF was interested in the factors that contributed to the vitality or lack of vitality of released striped bass. So the question was, what contributed to catch and release striped bass vitality versus mortality? And they partnered with us so that anglers could provide data about their caught striped bass immediately via the app versus putting a stamp on an envelope and it appearing at MassDMF, you know, 3 weeks later. And this is, I thought, was really powerful, right? So it turns out that the biggest drivers, the biggest contributors to the vitality of released striped bass were water temperature, the amount of time a fish was handled out of water, and what kind of tackle you used. And specifically, you can see bait led to the highest degree. The red is weak and the black is can't swim. So fishing with bait led to the highest degree of lack of vitality. And that was mostly, if you look at some other data, correlated with the fact that fish that were caught via bait were typically more often hooked in the esophagus or the gill or the gut than fish that were caught with artificial flies or lures. This is fascinating here. So you can see, you know, it's fine to handle a fish out of the water for up to 1.5 minutes plus. It's as soon as you get over 2 minutes that the vitality of fish, of released striped bass, just plummets. And that's a lesson we can all take to heart. You know, get the picture of the fish, put the fish back in the water as quickly as you possibly can. But that gives us really clear guidance on what leads to vitality of those striped bass. And then when you combine that with water temperature, all the more so, right? So as soon as that water temperature gets over 70 degrees, the vitality of released fish is very, very low. And there are folks, friends of mine on the call now who have told me anecdotally many times about the challenges they've had with reviving striped bass in very warm waters in the summer. But it's just so great to see the data that all of you collected with the GotOne app really starting to contribute to our understanding of the science behind how we catch and release striped bass successfully.
Luke, can I add a couple of things here?
Yeah, sure.
So one is, if everybody who is using lures could stop using trebles and be fishing barbless, which would also aid in releasing fish quicker. Or with all of us, even fly. If we fish barbless, we might lose 1 or 2 fish, but not really very much. But then that allows us to grab the fish while it's in the water and release the fish while they're still in the water, and that contributes to lower mortality.
Yeah, so we're gonna do a lot more work on this. Mike Hogan from Hoagie Lures worked with us to do a similar study around catch and release vitality of false albacore. So look forward, Jeff and Ed, to kind of crashing that against the work you're doing. And then the last thing I wanted to show, because this is really relevant to what Ed was showing earlier, was, if I can find it here, some of the work that we're doing. Let me stop this share and just bring up a different share that Tony mentioned. So, this is work that we're now starting to do with folks at Woods Hole. Jeff, I was mentioning this to Ed before you got on. Woods Hole and University of Chicago and a group called Striper Magic that have been working with a population of striped bass that return to a particular pond in Cape Cod every year, basically summer through fall, that come from natal waters all up and down the coast: Delaware, Chesapeake, Hudson, all the way up to Maine, Nova Scotia, etc. And they come in every season, and they're fed and they're happy. The waters are protected there from fishing, and they're tagged. They're both spaghetti tagged and acoustically tagged, but most importantly, they're photographed. So why is that important? Well, one of the things we're working on with the GotOne app is using AI for visual recognition of fish. So we are already at the point where we don't have this implemented in the app yet, but it'll be implemented this year. We can identify the species of a fish and the size of a fish from a photo of the fish, which is pretty powerful, right? So you won't have to, when you log a fish now, say, this is a striped bass, this is a tautog. It'll know automatically. That's pretty much a done deal. What we're really interested in is, can we create AI models that can uniquely identify a particular fish? And we've already done this with trout. The US Geological Survey, working with Trout Unlimited and a university in Japan, has already done this with trout and with the PAR markings on trout. But as you can see, these are pictures. These 3 striped bass here are pictures of fish from one year, and then these are the same fish photographs the next year. And you can see the consistency in the stripe pattern is very, very obvious. And we are already working on AI models to be able to positively identify individual fish. And so, to Ed's point about both the cost and the difficulty, and in certain cases the trauma of tagging fish, all of which we still need to do, right? There's no replacement for an acoustic tag, even with AI. But if everyone taking a photo of a fish and logging it in GotOne turns that into a digital AI-driven tag of a unique fish, we think we can completely transform our understanding of these fish populations. So that's next step for some of the work we're doing, and we're really looking forward to working with Ed and Jeff and Tony and others on this technology. But the technology is
Lou, let me throw one thing in there.
Yeah, go ahead.
Listen, when Lou and I first started, I kind of like redfish. It's kind of like my deal. So I was like, we're going to do a redfish because it's got a spot. And we're going to do a redfish. About 2 scientists later, I was like, crap, we're not going to do a redfish because the spot changes over the course of the fish's life. Can move, change shape, change color. So, when Lou's talk about these stripes, that I don't know how to explain this, but the AI may match the fish, but it may not be because of the stripe. It could have a nick on the scale. It could, I don't know. Nobody knows. It's AI, and you can't back engineer it. But if you can start teaching it to match, it's way more complicated than, oh, look, the 3rd stripe down. Yeah. Look, there's a little break in it. And believe me, it's way more complicated. It can see things we can't see. But showing it what a match is and having it learn that match, that's like, when my kid was, whatever, and I was like, 1 + 1 is 2. You know, well, pretty soon this thing's going to be doing trigonometry. So, you know, it's got to learn. And once it does, it's going to be doing stuff humans can't do. It's the
Yeah.
best way to put it. So
Yeah. And
that's it.
Tony, I think
Yeah.
as you and I discussed, like this is where it merges with the Albie Project. I think in 24, what we're hoping to do is get really good photographic records of the albies that are tagged and then and picked up again in another place so that we have training data for albies as well, because I'm
Yeah,
pretty
John just mentioned in there, Lou, that, you know,
Mhm.
if assuming the stripes don't change,
Yeah.
it ain't gonna be about the stripes.
Yeah, it's more so what we've already found, and we just literally spent 48 hours running analysis even on the data from Woods Hole. The stuff that the AI is picking up is way more complex even than what our eye gravitates to in these red circles. It has to do with the fin morphology, distances and relationships in terms of girth, length, distance between fins, size of scale. There's a whole host of things that we don't even think about that these AI models are able to compare and come up with the best sort of model for making that match. So we're just at the very beginning of this, but I'm, as you can hear from my voice, incredibly excited about the opportunity here. I think we're pretty sure we're going to be able to do something.
And Lou, if people want to help, if you want to help this thing learn, and it's with anything. I mean, we're starting with stripers. It's going to go to tog. It's going to go to weak fish. It's going to go to redfish. It's going to go to bluefish. We got to start somewhere. The more pictures you put in this thing, the more opportunity you're given this to learn.
Yeah.
App has a picture feature, and we're very private about everything. Just, you know, if you have any questions, we're happy to answer it on that. But you can backlog fish from last year, and the AI is going to use them to learn. And the more is more in this case, more is better. So just want to
Yep.
throw that in, Lou.
So thank you. Thanks for your support on that, Tony, and just excited to kind of put that together. So speaking of AI, I know that our friend Tom Fuda, who's been really my right hand working on a lot of the GotOne technology, is using AI to randomize a set of winners for the giveaway. Tom, do you want to raise your hand and we'll put you up on the screen, or do you want to just telegram them to me? Whatever's the easiest thing to do for you. Let's see. Did he let's see.
Didn't raise his hand.
All right. Let me text him here. Let's do so we got a shirt, a hat, and a dry bag, right?
Yeah.
So let's start with the hat. So yeah, Tom's gonna send it to me. So he's gonna send me a random name. So what we would ask is whoever we call in this, email us. Tom and Clay, you can put my email on in the chat. And then what we want you to do is email us and email a screenshot from GotOne. So we know that you registered, but just so we have it, that would be great. Tom,
In
drum
our
roll,
masters
please.
of the in our Masters of the Fly email, of course.
Okay, yeah, that's great. So send it to the Masters of the Fly email. By the way, also anyone who wants Masters of the Fly and GotOne stickers, please email us also. We'll send those out to you. Okay, so the first winner of the hat, Tony, is Parker Mouth, who's
Wow.
been a long time
Congratulations.
supporter of
I expect all of this information to be emailed to me. I am not taking notes.
Congratulations.
If I got to
Parker.
mail this stuff,
Okay,
email
Parker.
me, send me the address, Parker.
I got it. We got it. We got you
Okay,
covered.
cool.
We got you covered, Tony. Don't worry.
Congratulations, Parker.
I need
That's
this to be
awesome, man.
simplified.
Okay, Tom, let's go for a shirt here.
Email me the size of the shirt.
Yes. So, well, that's a good point. Tom's working on it. Drum roll. Fan of white.
By the way, Parker just sent us a woohoo, and we appreciate that, Parker.
Okay. Oh, Scott Bennett, who is from Woods Holes. Gets a shirt. Awesome. Very, very
Right.
cool. So we got the,
Congratulations.
so Scott, you'll need to let us know, email us and let us know your size. And we'll get that out. That's awesome. Very cool. And then the big grand prize, the dry bag. Drum roll. Tom's working on it. If it's Tom, I'm going to be really pissed. I think he's disqualified.
I was thinking of quitting just so I could win the dry bag.
Here we go. You can see the text coming in. Oh, George McAuliffe. George, congrats, man. George
Oh,
is
another longtime supporter of Masters of the Fly.
longtime supporter. Yes.
Yeah.
So there you go. Awesome. So congrats, folks. We'll get that out to you. Scott, we need to hear from you about the size. But at this point, let's just open it up. If there are any final questions here from anyone, anything anyone wants to share, let's also, why don't we also just put the, I guess we have it in the chat, right? But make sure we have the links to ASGA and New England Aquarium up so folks can support. Any other questions from anyone? And you're welcome to raise your hand too if you want to talk.
Yeah, if you want to be live, just hit
George
that
Baldwin said we need weak fish and got one, Tom. Let that, I agree with him. We'll get that done.
Yeah, that and Jack Creval.
True. Scott Bennett said a large, and he's like, oh yeah. Awesome. Love it.
Well, while we're waiting for more questions to come in, can we quickly post the schedule again? So people
yeah,
can-
let's put that back up for a second so everyone sees it. Maybe Tom, you can share that. Great. Yeah. So I think, the Jan 21 one in particular would be really super fun. We're going to do this from the Tie Flying Expo in Newport, Rhode Island, that Saltwater Edge and Peter Jenkins, who's the board chair of Saltwater Guides Association, is running. The best saltwater tires in the world will be there. Blaine will be there. Ben Wally will be, everyone will be there. And then Ben has graciously agreed to do a tying session with all of us after that. So definitely sign up for Jan 21st. Ben is an incredible tire. If you haven't seen it, go to Saltwater Edge and listen to his podcast. It's the most recent podcast, and see the picture of the Menhaden fly that he tied. It is unbelievable. If you need to tie big flies for big fish for this season, Ben is your man. He's an incredible guide out of Maine and a great conservationist. And Joe Blados, man, I mean, Freeze Fly is, arguably one of the 5 most innovative flies in saltwater history. So super excited to see.
I'd say it's synonymous with, Joe didn't invent it for topwater, but I'd say it's almost synonymous with any topwater fly. So, and it'll be exciting to hear how Joe came up with that and the whole metamorphosis of the Freeze Fly.
And then we got Tim O'Neill from nor-vise. So you may notice that David and I have a couple new vices here that we're tying on. We're really having fun learning about how to tie with this new nor-vise system. Tim is going to talk about sort of the techniques for sort of modern techniques for big fly tying. That'll be a great session as well. And then we got Blaine, excuse me, Blaine Chocolate. I'm getting all choked up about our sessions. Blaine Chocolate in March. And yeah.
And it'll be great. I know you're so choked up, but I cannot wait to see Blaine tie some flies for us. That'll be so exciting.
Yeah. So thank you all. Huge thanks to Ed and Jeff and Tony. Please go support the Albie Project. Please go support the work that ASGA is doing on striped bass. Please download GotOne and let us know how it works for you. Contribute your fish. And we really look forward to seeing you at our next session. So thanks everybody. Have a great
Good
night.
night.